What happens when the moment you least expect becomes the one you'll never forget? Imagine standing unguarded, stripped of every layer of protection, when suddenly the door opens and everything changes in an instant. Heart racing, breath caught, a rush of heat floods your skin, not from desire, but from the raw shock of being completely exposed. That I still remember the way my heart stopped in that single instant, the air in the room heavy with silence I couldn't break. One moment, I was carefree, wrapped in the safety of my own home, believing that privacy was an unquestionable right. The next, that sense of safety shattered as the door opened without warning, and there he was, my husband's father, standing frozen at the threshold. Time seemed to bend, stretching seconds into eternities as I stood exposed, both in body and soul, utterly defenseless against the wave of embarrassment that struck me like fire across my skin. The flush that rose to my face wasn't just physical. It was a storm of thoughts crashing inside me, the terrifying questions of judgment, respect, and the permanence of this memory. How could I ever look him in the eye again? How could he unsee what had been revealed? The silence between us was louder than any words, a silence full of disbelief, awkwardness, and something else I couldn't name. In that moment, I felt stripped of more than clothing. I felt stripped of dignity, of control, of the carefully maintained image I thought others held of me. Vulnerability is never something we prepare for, and here it was forced upon me in the most unforgiving way. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, to dissolve into thin air, but my body refused to move. I was locked in place, caught between the weight of exposure and the fear of what this meant for my relationship with him, with my husband, with the family I was still building my place in. Shame is a peculiar thing. It isolates you in a crowd, convinces you that you are the only person who could ever stumble so foolishly, even though deep down we all know what it means to be caught at our weakest. I searched his face for condemnation, for a flicker of disappointment, for anything that would confirm my dread, but what I saw startled me. His eyes darted away almost instantly, his expression filled not with criticism, but with an awkward respect, an unspoken apology that seemed to say he wished the ground would swallow him whole as much as I did. That small, human gesture softened the sharp edge of my fear, though it did little to erase the heat that burned in my chest. Vulnerability has a way of magnifying every second, making a glance feel like an eternity, making a single gesture ripple with meaning. And in that instant, though no words were spoken, I realized this wasn't just about exposure. It was about the fragility of trust, the discomfort of human imperfection, and the choice of how we respond when someone else's dignity is at stake. My heart pounded, my mind racing through possible futures. Would this incident cast a shadow over family gatherings? Would it become the silent joke whispered behind my back, the memory that could never be erased? I feared being defined by one moment, by a single accident that said nothing of who I was, yet threatened to linger forever. And yet, beneath all the panic, there was a strange flicker of awareness. Sometimes life confronts us with moments that seem unbearable, only to reveal something deeper about ourselves and those around us. As unbearable as it was, this moment wasn't just about shame. It was about how love and respect are tested, not in perfect situations, but in the cracks where awkwardness and imperfection slip through. Standing there, trembling, I understood something I hadn't before. Love isn't built only in candlelit dinners, sweet words, or carefully constructed images of grace. It's built in the raw, unplanned, utterly human moments that strip us bare, sometimes literally, and force us to face one another without pretense. The silence eventually broke with movement, with a door hastily shut, with breaths that tried to steady themselves in the aftermath. But the echo of that moment remained, not as a wound that destroyed, but as a strange beginning to something I could not yet define. I didn't know it then, but that instant of pure vulnerability, as humiliating as it felt, would become the seed of lessons I never expected to learn. Lessons about trust, about compassion, about the way love has the power to soften even the hardest edges of embarrassment. It was only the first page of a story that would remind me again and again, it is not perfection that binds us together, but the courage to see one another in our most unguarded states and choose kindness anyway. The hours after that moment felt heavier than entire days. My thoughts replayed it endlessly, every detail sharper in memory than it had been in reality. I imagined his expression over and over, convinced that even in kindness there must have been judgment lurking beneath. It is astonishing how quickly shame can rewrite the way you see yourself. I questioned my worth, my role, my place within the family, as if one awkward accident had the power to dismantle everything I had built. My husband noticed the distance in my eyes, the way I hesitated when his father's name was mentioned, and though I tried to mask it with laughter or distraction, he knew something weighed too heavily to ignore. Vulnerability has a way of spilling over, no matter how tightly we try to contain it. When I finally spoke, the words rushed out like a confession I feared would break what we had. But instead of anger, instead of dismissal, his response was steady and filled with warmth. He reminded me that love does not crumble over one mistake, that his father was not a man who clung to awkwardness, but one who understood the humanity of being caught unprepared. His reassurance was not only about soothing me, it was about reminding me that the bonds we share are not so fragile that a single uncomfortable moment could shatter them. His embrace did more than calm me. It reminded me that love is a shield when our confidence falters. What surprised me most was not my husband's understanding, but his father's quiet grace in the days that followed. He never mentioned the incident, not even with a nervous joke to brush away tension. Instead, he carried himself with a respect that spoke volumes in its silence. His kindness was evident in the way he looked at me without hesitation, the way he treated me exactly as before, refusing to let one accident define me in his eyes. That silence was not avoidance, it was compassion. It told me that he valued my dignity too much to use my vulnerability as a shadow between us. And so, the fear I carried began to soften. What had once felt like a stain on my pride slowly transformed into a reminder of something far deeper. People's true character reveals itself in moments where it would be easy to shame or ridicule, yet they choose empathy instead. That realization began to shift my perspective. I started to see that what had seemed like a personal disaster was, in fact, a chance to witness the strength of the family I had married into. It was a moment that could have created distance, but instead began to weave a new layer of trust. The truth is, vulnerability binds us more closely than perfection ever can. We spend so much of our lives trying to present ourselves in the best possible light, terrified that one slip will define us. But when those slips happen, as they inevitably do, the response we receive matters more than the mistake itself. In this case, instead of judgment, I was met with kindness. Instead of gossip, I was met with silence. Instead of distance, I was met with warmth. That is what began to heal me. As the days turned into weeks, I realized the incident had given me a different kind of closeness with both my husband and his father. It was not the closeness built through shared hobbies or laughter over meals. It was the closeness born from knowing someone had seen me at my most exposed and had chosen to preserve my dignity anyway. That choice created a trust stronger than any carefully curated image I could have presented. It was in this space of respect that my fear melted into gratitude. Looking back, I began to understand that every family has its uncomfortable stories, the ones that are too awkward to tell yet too significant to forget. They are reminders that love is not a polished picture, but a living, breathing connection made resilient by imperfections. What I once saw as an unforgivable embarrassment slowly became proof that I was surrounded by people who valued me beyond the surface, who understood that love is not about never stumbling, but about always rising together. And though my heart still raced when I remembered the sudden opening of that door, the memory no longer carried the weight of shame. It carried the evidence of grace, of respect, of the unspoken promise that even in life's most unexpected moments, dignity could be preserved and bonds could grow stronger. What began as humiliation became the foundation for trust one hadn't realized was possible. In that trust, I found not only healing but also a deeper understanding of what it means to be truly accepted. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, but true healing requires more than just the passage of days. It requires connection, reassurance, and the quiet rebuilding of trust within ourselves. The awkward memory lingered, but slowly it transformed into something different. Instead of being haunted by it, I began to reflect on what it had revealed. It showed me the kind of husband I had chosen, a man whose love never wavered even when I doubted myself. It showed me the kind of father-in-law I had gained, someone who instinctively protected dignity rather than tearing it down. And most importantly, it showed me something about myself, that I could face moments of deep vulnerability and still rise with grace, still hold my head high even when I had once thought it impossible. Conversations with my husband became deeper in those weeks. We no longer spoke only of plans and routines, but of the unspoken fears and insecurities that we usually kept hidden. That single incident had unlocked something, the courage to be completely honest, to admit when I felt fragile, and to discover that fragility did not weaken our bond, but strengthened it. There is a rare intimacy in being truly seen by another, not in moments of beauty, but in moments of imperfection, and realizing that love doesn't falter in those moments. It grows. What surprised me even more was how his father subtly, almost silently, became part of this healing. There were no grand gestures, no heavy conversations about what had happened, yet his actions spoke louder than words. He treated me with kindness that never wavered, respect that never cracked, and a warmth that made it clear the incident did not define me. In that quiet acceptance, I found something powerful. I began to understand that healing often comes not from words, but from presence, the steady reminder that you are still valued, still respected, still seen as whole. With time, the fear of judgment dissolved into gratitude. Gratitude for a husband who held me steady when I was shaken, for a father-in-law who chose compassion over awkwardness, and for the strange twist of life that turned an embarrassing moment into an opportunity for growth. It struck me that relationships are not made resilient by perfection, but by how we handle the unpredictable. Anyone can celebrate the easy moments, but it takes true strength to navigate the ones that test us. And in navigating this test, I discovered the unshakable foundation of the family around me. I also began to notice how this experience reshaped the way I viewed vulnerability itself. Before, I had always seen it as weakness, something to hide at all costs. But what I learned was the opposite. Vulnerability is a bridge. It connects us in ways perfection never could. When we allow ourselves to be seen as imperfect, we invite others to meet us with empathy, and in that space, real connection flourishes. My fear of being diminished turned into the realization that I was not diminished at all. I was, in fact, more deeply human, and in that humanity, I was more deeply loved. This awareness began to seep into other parts of life. I no longer felt the need to uphold flawless appearances at all times. I could laugh at small mistakes, shrug off imperfections, and see them for what they really were, chances to grow closer, to be more real, to deepen bonds. What once felt like a wound became a gift because it showed me that I was safe to be imperfect, and that safety is one of the rarest and most beautiful forms of love. And so, healing did not mean forgetting the incident. It meant transforming it. It meant carrying it not as a burden, but as proof of resilience, proof of acceptance, proof of love that had passed through fire and come out stronger. The story that once filled me with shame began to fill me with gratitude. It was no longer a reminder of exposure, but a reminder of the strength that comes when love chooses kindness over judgment. Looking back now, I realize that the moment which once felt like the end of my dignity became the beginning of a new way of understanding love. It is easy to assume that love thrives only in polished moments, in carefully curated images of happiness and grace. But real love, the kind that endures and deepens, is born in the mess, in the interruptions, in the unexpected cracks where life reveals its unpredictability. That day taught me that love is not destroyed by embarrassment, but rather shaped by how we respond when life knocks us off balance. What could have been a lasting wound turned into a thread that wove our bonds tighter, stronger, and more genuine than before. I came to see that compassion is the silent language of love, spoken not through grand declarations, but through small, deliberate choices. My husband's quiet reassurance, his unwavering defense of my worth when I doubted myself, was proof that love stands steady even in the storms of insecurity. His father's respectful silence, his refusal to let awkwardness fester into judgment, was proof that respect is an act of love in itself. Together, these gestures painted a picture of what true family looks like, a place where dignity is preserved, where kindness is chosen even when it would be easier to laugh or criticize, where every flaw becomes an invitation to deepen connection rather than fracture it. That realization reshaped my heart. I no longer saw the incident as a shadow to avoid, but as a memory that revealed the depth of the people around me. In its rawness, it showed me the kind of love I had married into, not just